didn't have a life before gambling was harmful, not as an adult. Any time up until my recovery started that was my time, was my gambling time. If I had a night away from the kids, I'd be gambling.
How do you start to rebuild your life from that point?
Slowly, why can't it be right? I'm trying now. Why isn't my life good? Well, my life is good now because I look for the better things.
If there are women who are listening to this or watching this who are experiencing homelessness as a result of gambling harms, what would you say to them?
You've got to reach out.
Welcome to New Beginnings, a podcast exploring the impact of gambling harms on women's lives. I'm Natasha Devon, author, broadcaster, and mental health campaigner. And together, we will be hearing from those directly affected by gambling harms, looking at the challenges that can arise during recovery, but most importantly, hearing stories of hope. This show is brought to you by Bet No More UK, a charity providing peer-led services like New Beginnings, a women's-only service. This podcast is part of the National Gambling Support Network. To find out more, go to betnomoreuk.org or call the free National Gambling Helpline on 0808 8020 133 for 24/7 support. In today's episode, we're looking at the challenges of homelessness and gambling harms. As always, I'm joined by Lisa Walker, New Beginnings lead facilitator and expert by experience. Hello, Lisa.
Hi, Natasha.
This week, we're asking how to rebuild your life after gambling harms and homelessness. In a world where gambling is so often glamorized, we rarely talk about the lasting harm it can cause. I'm joined by Angela Middleton, who knows this only too well. Her story is one of addiction, loss, and ultimately recovery. Angela, welcome to New Beginnings.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. So let's start off by getting to know you a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit about your life before gambling became harmful for you?
I was a child.
Okay.
It's a long time ago. No, I didn't have a life before gambling was harmful, not as an adult.
So when was the first time that you can remember gambling being a part of your life?
When I was a toddler.
Okay.
When we went on holiday with our bag of coins that Nana had given us, and you were literally given your money and went into the amusement arcade. So the first money I ever held that was mine, I was expected to gamble with it.
What happened after that then? So talk me through your kind of later childhood, your teens. Was gambling becoming more and more part of your life during those years?
Yeah. Oh, yes. I started work when I was 12 and I was a waitress, but in a complex, if you like. It had a coffee shop, a restaurant, and catered for weddings, and it also had a nightclub attached and a bar. So when I would get paid, in between my shifts, I would go and use the bandit, and even though I was not old enough to even be working, nobody said anything about me going on the bandit either, the slot machine. So, yeah, my wages, not all of them then. I used to keep some back at that point. And I think I got a pub when I was 22. It was with my ex-partner and his parents. And on the day we took over the lease was the same day as my son was born. So I changed addresses while I was in hospital. And then I had open access to a bandit, as in... slot machine. So I would put 50 pence pieces in at the top and have it open at the bottom, but all the wins came out as pound coins, which I would then take to the club for when I was going to bingo, apart from sometimes I didn't do bingo because I'd go into the slots.
So this is spiraling. You can see you're spending more and more time engaging with this habit and it's dominating your life more and more. Can you remember why that felt important at the time? Was there anything that you were trying to escape?
Probably it's just my life in general. I think any time up until my recovery started that was my time, was my gambling time. So if I had a night away from the kids, I'd be gambling. If I had a day away from my ex-partner and the kids, I'd be gambling. It was my go-to. Now I kind of think of it as it was an affair. It was this really nice man who wanted me to sneak around with him, but didn't want me when I had no money, but would wait till I did. So yeah, that's kind of how I look at it now.
That's a really interesting way of framing it, I think. Lisa, I wonder, listening to what Angela's saying, is this something you hear a lot from women, that it feels like this kind of clandestine thing that's just for you and no one else, and it can feel a little bit like an affair?
Yeah, I guess, when you're sort of in the thick of a gambling addiction, well, it's a lonely place as well because we do it on our own, but also when you're being drawn in, like to the fruit machines or the roulette, I guess, I've never sort of thought about it, but now Angela's saying it, I guess it probably was like an affair, because you can't wait to do it. You're getting that buzz, and I guess like an affair, getting that buzz, that high, what people get, I guess that's, now I can see from your point of view, what you meant by that.
I can completely see how it would feel that way to you. And so at what point did homelessness play a role in your life?
The first time was when my house burnt down, and I got housed with the local authorities, but then I got evicted because I didn't pay the rent. But then my children went to live with their older sister, which I'm not going to say much about because that's their story as well.
Of course, yeah.
And I then began living in shared houses. So it was like minimum rent and all the bills were covered. And in 2020, my dad passed away, at which point I had no more responsibilities to anybody. My children were fully grown by that point and speaking to me again. And I got a job as a living carer, so I had no rent because I never had a problem with gambling.
Okay.
I had a problem paying bills because it wouldn't let me gamble. So I was fully aware of what I was doing. I was removing any barriers to me being able to gamble is what I was doing.
So every single decision you're making in your life is informed by how much will I be able to gamble if I do this thing?
Absolutely.
So when was the moment where you decided to stop?
I was working for a company in Scotland, which was very nice, and I was with a very lovely client. And I think seeing their family dynamics with their grandkids, and then I was able to say, oh, well, I've bought my daughter this, I've bought my son that, and I'm like, but I haven't given them anything. I haven't given them any time. I'm not making any memories. So that was when I approached Gordon Moody, and I went then to do residential. However, I delayed it for 6 months because I wanted to make more money to gamble, obviously, because what else would I do? And I kind of thought I would be able to go, well, I've tried that and that didn't work, so look, and go back. But it did work. But I did come out homeless because I was a living carer and I took very few weeks off, so I didn't have a home.
It's so interesting that you went into Gordon Moody thinking this won't work. I just want to be able to say I've done it.
Yes.
What do you think it was about that program that made it so effective for you?
The therapy. Yeah, there was a lot of talking, doing your money story, the whys and the what fors. And I think ultimately it's the, you don't control it. And I like control. So I controlled everything to ensure that I could do something that I couldn't control, and which is a bit weird. It's like a juxtaposition, isn't it? And I corresponded with my children, a phone call, because we had our phones an hour a night. And I used to look forward so much to speaking to them that when I got the phone, I didn't even think about gambling. I had a strict schedule when I went in. It wasn't enforced by Gordon Moody. Before I went in, I just didn't want the disappointment of not having a phone call. So I only went for my phone when I had a scheduled phone call. So, and I had kind of a tree, if you like, a phone tree of so-and-so was going to phone me on Friday. I never phoned anybody because I didn't want to be upset by ringing somebody and them not picking the phone up.
Right.
So I was and I went in there bare, as honest as I could be.
And it's brilliant that it worked for you, but in your words, then you've emerged from that homeless. I mean, Lisa, People shouldn't be put in this position, should they, where they're effectively having to choose between having somewhere to live and getting the help that they need. Is this a story that you hear a lot?
Unfortunately, it is a story we hear. I've just got some sort of stuff to read out. So there is very little data on the rates of women of gambling harms amongst women experiencing homelessness in the UK. However, there is research that shows that among homelessness women, gambling harms are more likely to be found, and gambling harms make women more vulnerable to experiencing homelessness. That homelessness can take the form of sofa surfing, housing insecurity and rough sleeping. There is also a relationship between gambling and domestic abuse, and the lack of secure alternative housing can make it difficult for women experiencing gambling-related domestic abuse to leave those in abusive relationships. And I guess, you know, when I look back, so when I was 35, my children were 10 and 11, and I did end up homeless and on the streets. And when I did go up to the local council, I was made to feel that they wish I'd been a drug addict or an alcoholic because they didn't know what to do with a gambler. And I said, I'm begging for help, and nobody signposted me anywhere. I remember the look on the woman's face when she looked at me. It was like I was just a bit of dirt on her shoe. And I felt, you can imagine, I've got 2 children, one of them severely disabled, and I'm homeless. I didn't intentionally make myself homeless, but I was made to feel like that. And I guess Angela's story as well, like going into Gordon Moody and then coming out, and I know Angela's story because we speak every week, and I know what she had to go through when she come out of Gordon Moody, which she'll talk about, the struggles with having to house share with, I mean, you can talk about, you know, what you went through when you come out. It was pretty horrendous for Angela.
It wasn't good, was it?
No.
I remember.
I mean, please do tell us about that.
So I had an arrangement with my children. We put in boundaries, and one of the boundaries was that we're not allowed to ask a question that no is not an acceptable answer.
Okay.
Not so good when you're homeless, because I went on the train to a recovery thing. And on the way home, I realised, the way back to the northeast, I realised I hadn't organised somewhere to sleep that night. And I was going to ask the kids, because how can they say no? So this has now become a question I can't ask. And to be true to myself, I've got to keep the boundaries that I put in place.
So the boundary was you're not allowed to ask them something
they
that they
don't
would
ask of me either,
or vice versa, that you would feel pressured that you had to say yes, essentially. Yes. Okay. All right.
So, for instance, if I'm on the train coming back from an event and I say, oh, by the way, I'm back in Darlington at 8:30 and I've got nowhere to sleep tonight. Can you pick me up and can I stay at your house? Otherwise, I'm sleeping on the street. I think that's pretty much me saying that you can't say no. You've got to say yes. So I didn't put my children in that position. I was very fortunate that particular night that I put in a WhatsApp message to the ladies I'd been in recovery with, and one of them said, come to mine. So I was literally on the train booking a ticket back, because a few moments prior, I had phoned the emergency number I'd been given for housing overnight, if you're going to be sleeping rough.
Yeah.
They got back to me and said I was not a priority, and they were sick of the daytime people giving their number out when it is them that decide that you're not a priority.
But on what basis were you not a priority?
I have no idea.
Wow.
I don't know what makes you a priority.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind at the time I was a 49-year-old, 4'11" woman with a rucksack with all my belongings in. So I don't know what makes you a priority for being housed overnight.
I mean, it's such a massive thing to go through. How do you start to rebuild your life from that point?
Slowly. But you want it to be quick.
Yeah.
It's, I know Sue said when we first met, I was negative Nelly, wasn't I? Everything was wrong. Everything was somebody else's fault. You know, why can't it be right? I'm trying now. And why? I'm being good now. Why isn't my life good? Well, my life is good now because I make it that way. I look for the better things. I don't focus on the negatives. Stay very present in the moment is another thing, and be grounded. I spend a lot of time wandering around the house going, the only thing that's actually real in this moment is the floor beneath my feet, the walls beside me, and the breath going into my lungs. Everything else is just my imagination running away with me. There's a saying, I've lived 1,000 crises in my life, and some of them actually happened.
Yeah.
And that's very much what it was like. It was like, there's not actually anything bad happening in this moment.
Yeah, I guess it's like a form of mindfulness, isn't it? Reminding yourself what you have evidence
Lots of mantras.
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing's bad going to happen. We call it unicorns and dinosaurs. If I say, oh, I'm going to go and get the train today and it's going to be late and they're not going to let me on the other train, and I'll be like, my kids will go, Mum, dinosaurs and unicorns.
I like that. And I also thought it was really interesting what you said about changing your habits around gambling and then thinking, well, why hasn't everything else fallen into place?
Oh, yeah.
Because you've switched that thing. I mean, Lisa, is that something that you hear a lot, the expectation of things should be good immediately?
Oh, yeah. People, yeah, like people that come out of rehab or they sort of, it was like, you know, like I say with Angela, we speak every week on the health and wellbeing group, and people are like, well, why isn't this happening for me? I've given up gambling, so why can't this happen? And it's got to happen now. And I'm like, well, you know, we have to take one day at a time and concentrate. You know, you're in recovery now, so let's concentrate on, you know, one thing. And just even getting Angela out of the houses that she was in, because you was in so many different places, weren't you?
Oh,
and
yeah,
then,
travelled around friends, babysat or dog sat, and, you know, all the sitting. I did all the sitting.
but no matter where she was, every week she'd come on the health and wellbeing groups. She had to sometimes sit in a bathroom or it was anywhere she could sit, and I thought it doesn't matter as long as you're getting the therapy and you're talking to the other women, that, you know. And that's when Angela, and then all of a sudden you got the lucky break. Well, you got, didn't you, from the council?
Yeah, I mothered people, and now I have my own little bungalow, and I have my 2 little dogs and my 4 little puppies. I forget how long I spent in shared accommodation. I think the low point was at about 6:15 one morning, and I looked up and there was 2 female police officers leaning over my bed. And I was a bit like, hello. And they were like, oh, is there anybody in this room that shouldn't be? And I'm like, you. Because it's happened 6 a.m.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. It was somebody else who was in the house. It was a female house, and there was a male living in the house, and the police knew he was in the house because that's where his ankle monitor was detected. And so, yeah, it really wasn't safe. Everybody in the house was an addict. I was the only one in active recovery, and they were substance addicts, or drugs and drink. And it was pretty gnarly. I did stay in my room with a bucket to pee in, and wait for them both to go out to go and tip me effluents down the toilet. And I had a halogen cooker and a plug-in hob and 4 pint of empty milk cartons that I had my water supply in. Yeah, not good times.
And now you're coming out the other side.
Oh, I'm out.
And you're,
I'm not going back.
You're out. What advice would you give if there are women who are listening to this or watching this who are experiencing homelessness as a result of gambling harms? What would you say to them?
You've got to reach out is the big thing. I would give them some of my tools out my toolbox, which would be obviously Better No More, Epic Restart Foundation, some people like GA. It's very difficult in your own locations because they've got, well, I found for me that addiction was classed as drink or drugs.
Right.
So if you put addiction in it, would signpost you to drink and drugs, not gambling. It's a bit difficult because they'd have to come to me to get the information. It's not easy to signpost somebody.
I was just going to say, I think if anyone's listening and they are sort of in that, and that they're homeless or they're going to be evicted. I think the first port of call is the council. You need to speak to your local council, your housing officer. If you've got a social worker, speak to your social worker, and then just explain, what's happened. Once you've explained, I think you start Googling support out there, what charities are out there to help you, and you will be surprised at the amount of charities now. Like Angela said, depending on where you are in the country, there's all different support groups, and I think this is another thing women don't know about. People don't know that Gordon Moody have got residential retreats for men and women. People don't know about Epic Restart, which they do wonderful work, with Stacey Goodwin, who's the Girl Gambler. They take you on weekends away. Then you've got sort of like places in Manchester, Newcastle, wherever you are, there's something in different areas. And I think this needs to be on the website, so that people, when they do type in gambling harms, it comes up, this is what's out there, so people can understand. Or even if we could ever get to it where there's a gambling advert on the telly and it says be gamble aware, and there's a QR code at the bottom of it, and you can say scan this for extra help, and then you scan that QR code, and then it takes you to a page where there's help and support for people. I think that would be a really good idea, because
it's a great idea.
People don't know. When women come through New Beginnings and we do the offboarding session, I say to them, like Thriving Together, and they're like, what's Thriving Together? And I'm like, Nadine Ashworth runs it, or there's GamFam for families that are affected. There's so much people don't know, and that what we need to get out there. I think that's really important. But if you're listening and you're struggling, reach out, and within 48 hours we can be helping you.
It feels to me, listening to you talk, like the system is the thing that needs to change, actually. That there needs to be more acknowledgement that this is something that does affect women. But also, in both of your stories, there's an element of not being seen as urgent or not being taken seriously because of the nature of the addiction that you had. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, oh God, yeah.
Yeah, and
absolutely.
I think this is why us doing these podcasts are so important, because, things need to change. Councils, government, everyone needs to understand that gambling harms is just as serious as a drug addiction or an alcohol addiction, and it does affect women. And unfortunately, since COVID, we've seen a huge number of women that are, have become addicted to gambling on their phones. We have seen so many women like losing their houses and sofa surfing, and not knowing where to go. And so if all the councils, I don't know what we need to do, but we need to do something to try and protect the women. And also, when you're coming out of rehab, we need to have that sort of safe pathway back into society, which Gordon Moody are brilliant at. They are good, and they do follow up with all the women. But I think we need more residential places. I think there needs to be a lot more done.
There is sexism even within the recovery path, because I found out on the last day of being in Gordon Moody that had I had a penis, they have a different system.
Right. Because
men can, I don't know, leave the families easier or something. So that if you were homeless leaving, you would get a house within Dudley. They have an arrangement with the council, or housing within Dudley. However, not for me. It was too late.
I think what Angela's trying to say as well is the men's programme is a lot longer than the women's programme.
Right, okay.
So I think the men's, it was 13 weeks.
Yes.
Roughly, and the women's is about 6 weeks.
But why?
5 weeks, 5 days.
Well, this is I think it's a lot to do with women that have got families, children.
Oh, I see.
Being, and I know this again, it's not always the case, but I do think. So for me, when I did reach out to Gordon Moody years and years ago, it was you've got to come in, and obviously being a mum with someone who's disabled, trying to get her looked after was virtually impossible.
Yeah.
And I guess that is what I believe.
That's exactly
the reason.
Yeah, to have a system to work, it's got to be for the more people rather than the less people.
Yeah.
If they said you had to go in for 13 weeks as a woman, most would be like, I can't do 13 weeks.
I mean, it doesn't seem like it should be beyond the wit of humanity to come up with something flexible that works for women with families and women who are mothers. And hopefully us having this conversation will get people who have the power to do so thinking about what that could look like. Thank you so much, both of you. What a fascinating conversation. That is it for this episode of New Beginnings. Thank you to Angela for sharing your story. And thank you, as ever, to Lisa.
Thank you.
If you've been affected by any of the topics covered in this episode, please contact the National Gambling Helpline on 0808 8020 133 for 24/7 support. Or go to betnomoreuk.org for more information about the New Beginnings programme. If you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, comment and share. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Bet No More UK, to catch all of our episodes. I'm Natasha Devon. Thank you for joining us as we uncover the complexities of gambling and its far-reaching effects. See you next time.